partial fulfillment of the course of feature writing. Now today we're going to dive a bit into feature writings, and we're going to dive deeper into some award-winning feature articles. With me today I have Miss
Rochelle Pinot. Hi.
And Shanice Davis.
All right, so they have 2 award-winning pieces and we'd love to hear about them. So what is the piece that you have today? What is your story about?
My story, Crooks, is entitled Snowfall, the Avalanche at Tunnel Creek by John Branch. Now this story is about an avalanche that killed 16 skiers in 2012.
So before we even go down in depth into that story, let's talk about the headline, the title of it. What do you think about it?
I feel after reading this story, the headline, Snowfall, is the most appropriate headline for this story. And I will elaborate more when I'm going into the details.
Alright. So for example, you did not know about the story, you heard the headline.
Right.
What was your thought, or what do you think about it?
Instantly, the name Snowfalls let me think that, probably someone fell in the snow. I'm thinking about something tragic happening in the snow, something along the lines of something falling, probably something heavy. So, some equipment or something. That's what I'm thinking about.
Okay. Well, I just think about snow and fall. I think about December.
That's true.
And you can think about the play on the words. The snow, meaning the literal snow that they were working with, and also the fall could mean the fall of, when you think about the fall of someone, you're thinking about the death of somebody. Combines, it's absolutely appropriate, simple, and very I wouldn't say rewarding, but
when you explain it like that, just breaking down the name of the story, I think the writer for that story is very creative in terms of creating that name for just a story, because the name itself is a whole different story by itself. That could have been a separate story. So I think just the name alone gives us an idea of what to expect within the story, and I love that breakdown that you did.
And we have to remember that in feature writing, you have to have a good headline. The headline alone, as I said, should actually tell the story. So just give us a little synopsis of your story.
I want to read this line to you that grabbed me at the initial stage of reading the story. And we spoke about leads, but this lead is impeccable. It's brilliant. And it reads, the snow burst through the trees with no warning but a last second whoosh of sound. A 2-story wall of white and Chris Rudolph piercing cry, avalanche, Elise. What you get from that?
Chills.
Literal chills.
Honestly,
you can hear,
I can see,
you can see, you can feel.
I can
feel it.
I can. Impeccable,
Right.
very creative, and I love the visual of it.
The use of the words.
It's an amazing piece.
Descriptive, very descriptive.
Very descriptive.
I like that.
The overview of the story, however, is about some risk takers, 6 skiers that love risk taking. And I mean, in media you have to know how to do a little risk taking yourself, right? And they wanted to do something that was never done before. So despite of the danger that they knew was waiting at the top of that mountain, despite of knowing that they could be in danger, they still went ahead and took the risk. And they knew this because of the previous weather that was there in the following week. Not
So
the
they were
following, the
aware.
past week.
Mhm.
Right, so they were aware.
They knew
But
this.
yet still, they had a thirst and a hunger to do the undone. And they went ahead and they skied on the mountain, and an avalanche as big as 100 cars.
Ooh.
Can you imagine how big that is?
Yeah.
That's what the writer used to describe it.
That's what the writer used to describe it.
Who is that? Who is the author?
Swoop
Who's the
them
writer?
up. John Branch,
John.
along with many other
Yeah.
that helped to
Put the piece
edit
together.
the piece.
But let me tell you, John, right off the bat, you did it.
Yeah.
We can see why this story is an award-winning piece. We can see where it comes from. Literally, the descriptive terms and just the breakdown and giving real life examples so that we can picture how big of a snow that must
That is
have
right.
been to come down.
That is right.
You know.
The appeal and the emotions.
And outside of the story, let's talk about the user experience, the multimedia integration.
Mm-hmm.
They had incorporated a 3D video of what the mountain looked like at the time.
So we don't only read it.
You're not only reading it, you are seeing what the mountain is.
Mm-hmm.
They incorporate a real life 3D image
Mm-hmm.
of what the mountain would have been like.
Right.
So outside of using these descriptive words and the visual representation is there to back it. It is revolutionary.
Mm-hmm.
It pushes the border of what
Right.
feature could be.
Yeah.
Right.
It pushes the border.
Right.
And it was very creative.
Yeah, and not only that, they attached images of all the persons that died.
Wow.
And not only a profile shot, but it showed you their families. And it gave you a whole gallery of the persons. And you could see the smiles on their faces. You could see the persons that they left behind.
Mm-hmm.
This piece is exceptional.
Wow.
It's amazing.
He did really well on that piece and the compelling storytelling aspect of it. It's a tragedy. It's really a sad story.
It's a
But how he
beautiful
crafted the story,
Yeah.
it's beautiful.
It felt like it was my family.
Right.
It's really beautiful.
I could directly relate to what is happening. And when I say relate, let me read another part of my story here so you can understand the visual that not only seeing like the multimedia assets of it, but the words and how he put together the story. She was on her back, her head pointing downhill. Her goggles were off, Her nose ring had been ripped away. She felt the crushing weight of snow on her chest. She could not move her legs. One boot still had a ski attached to it, and she could not lift her head because it was locked into the ice.
Wait, why am I seeing this right now? I'm literally seeing the person.
You're
right
there.
Now. It feels like I'm there.
I'm there standing on the cold
And I'm
snow,
looking at her.
looking at her buried in the snow.
Yeah.
Is it weird to say that this is a beautiful tragedy? Because it's so beautifully written, but it's such a tragedy.
Yes,
It is.
definitely.
The way how he crafted it, the descriptive words, you can visualize it.
This is good storytelling.
This is why I like features, because it's so free formed. You can
Yeah.
basically write however you want, and the videos and the pictures is a plus to it. It's a bonus. You know, let us know who you're talking about. You know, let me see what they look like. And even in just writing, I could just see that. But I mean, in terms of, let me see the color, the complexion of the person, the hair, you know, and it makes me bond with them more, bond with the story more. So I think that was great. So I love features.
It's amazing. And you can see that this story could not have been written with just out of the top information.
Right. And
They
that's
had to
yeah,
do some amount
of research.
of research.
Right. That's something I
Into-
appreciate in your script, because you can see in-depth researching. You know, it was well in depth. It was well researched, and to know to pinpoint that, listen, this young lady was in the snow, her head dug into the ice, her nose ring was torn out. You had to go through some level, some extensive research to gather that information. It just doesn't float on top. It's not basic information. It's not like you're saying that this person died in the snow, full stop. You're telling me how this person died. You're telling me how they looked while they were, going through that whole ordeal. So I think that definitely, I agree with you. It's really in-depth research that was put into that story.
Some amount of investigative journalism right there.
That's
That
true.
is true.
That is true.
That is very
That's
much
true.
To write that story. Because as you said, that cannot just float from the top of our head. As it relates to the length, what do you think of the length?
The length is extremely appropriate.
Right, for a feature, right?
From the moment I started reading this, I wasn't worried about how long it is. It could take me my entire life to read the entire
You'd have
thing.
finished.
It was so captivating, and I was there, and it pulled my emotions out of my body. It made me cry.
Right.
I was wiping my tears while reading this piece, and I wasn't worried about the length
Right.
of it. I just wanted to get to the end.
You
That
wanted
is
to
how,
see the final result.
right. And this is how we should strive to write features. I dare myself to write features.
It's a compelling piece.
Yes, like
Right?
this.
As a TV student, I'm not really in for the reading, but when I tell you, you sent that story over and I saw just the first paragraph, I want to say, I was like, interesting. Let me see what's the next paragraph about. And then I read the next one, I was like, let me see what the next one is about.
Yeah.
And I kept going because it was like, I want to know more about what happened because it was so interesting to me. So I agree with you.
Yeah, the length. It was like looking at it, I was like, okay, alright, let's just read the first part alone. Probably we'll just understand from that because the lead would tell you what's in the story. But then after it, you're like, oh my god, let's see what happened, and we're going until we're at the end. And it was really beautiful.
Right, it was. And before you I close off my story here, I just want to pinpoint that they gave some background information
About the
they gave
family
the history of
skiing.
the area with avalanches.
Wow. Yeah.
So you see what I mean? They did not just tell you the story black, blonde like that. They took you to the place that the story they interviewed the right persons.
Right.
They showed you visuals of what it was like there, and they went as far back as to give you background information on the area and what it is like in that area with the history of avalanches. It's impeccable.
And interviews are really important when you're doing features. You have to know the right questions to ask and the right people to ask those questions. So that was a well-written piece. So we can conclude that this piece is a narrative piece, right?
It's most definitely
It's a narrative feature.
it's good storytelling, and I can see why this story is award-winning enough. But just to close off here, the story is a representation of multimedia format, incorporating interactive maps, video photographs, and in-depth reporting to create an immersive and impactful reader experience. It not only serves as a compelling narrative, but also a cautionary tale about the hazards of venturing on into the wilderness unprepared, particularly in avalanche-prone areas.
I you know what? I don't want to take over your story, but I'm in love. I think I did the wrong story, and I think not only was it, sentimental and playing on our emotions, but one, it was very informative, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that it cautioned the persons, the well-detailed story is good, and I think it cautioned persons who wanted to go and to try it, because it started off by saying it was risk takers, right?
Yeah.
And so I think the descriptive writing cautioned upcoming skiers and upcoming, athletes within that atmosphere to just be mindful as well as we want to be the first timers, or we want to be the first to ever have done this. It still played a part in educating persons to be cautious.
Which is right.
Right. I love this piece. Honestly, I'm envious.
I mean, it spoke to us. Just reading it alone, and we can see why it is an award-winning piece.
Yes.
Well, we're going to jump right to our next story, and I think this is the Watergate story.
It is indeed, and my story is not as emotionally connecting as Shani's story, but it is one just as equally important. So the Watergate story is a political corruption story, and I think this is where media brought light to government organization and just the political governance in general. So the Watergate story refers to a major political scandal that unfolded in the United States during the early 1970s. It centered around the break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters in the Watergate office complex in Washington, D.C. And that all happened in June 17.
So I want to know though, like that journalist.
Brave, very brave. So the reality of it is that we had so the Watergate story, let me just say that it's not just one story. It's multiple stories piled together, and the overall heading for the story is called Watergate. So initially there was a break-in that happened at the White House, and there was this investigation that was going on because you're breaking into the White House. Who wouldn't investigate that?
Right.
And so in doing their investigation, they found out that these two men wanted to plant communication devices into someone's office. And they're like, why would you, of all persons, want to plant a listening device, So they went through, and in doing their investigation, they found a phone book. And in that phone book is where they found one name of the campaign manager of the current president. And the current president at the time was Richard Nixon. And so they found it weird. Why would, these burglars have the contact information for the campaign manager for our current president? Because at the time he would have been opting to run again to get back his position. And so continuing the investigation, they realized that it was a crew, including the president himself, who was in this whole ordeal. They had planned to rig the upcoming election by listening in and doing whatever they wanted to do, by winning it by any means. And as such, the journalists within the environment who were going through this case, they brought it forward to the public and started to make it come to life. And as such, the president himself, Richard, decided that it would be best for him to resign. And since then, he has been the only United States president to have resigned. And this scandal, when you refer to anything politically inclined and it refers to any sort of scandal, it is now quoted as Watergate, the Watergate story, because that is the infamous political scandal of the century.
And I believe probably that's why it won an award. It's award winning.
Right, because
so this feature is more on the news side.
Right, it's more so news investigative type of journaling, because they had to dig deep for these information.
I was going to say, like, who did they interview? How did they know who to interview? How did they get those? How did they get the story? Like, how?
And based on my understanding and reading the story, they had this one person in the White House who they call quote unquote deep throat. Ask me why the person is called that, I don't know, but that's the name that they refer to the person as. And that person was very instrumental in getting the details of what the whole plan was and how they were about to execute it, and over the time, how long this plan was in the making. So that's how they got the information on everything. And I think it was just incredible, because as journalists, sometimes when we come up against political stories, we don't necessarily want to cover them because we're afraid that, you know what, you don't know if this company is aligned to this organization and you don't want to tear down this
Because
person.
of the influence.
Yeah.
Right. But I think the journalist who got the award for this story, they did an amazing job by
Yeah.
bringing this public, by bringing light to the
So,
story.
yeah.
I think they really did.
I was going to say that because it's really hard, or it's really hard to get a scandal story out. While you can see bits and pieces of it, to get an entire story out, a scandal,
Right.
Come on, let's
Right.
be real. Like,
And with this story, not only did it bring light and it played a part in the public interest, but it also inspired other media houses now to start looking into these political organizations, because normally everybody would think that politically everything is fine, or there's a line that you don't cross politically. And so when this company and this story came from the Washington Times, is it Washington Times? This story came from the Washington Post, right? And so when the Washington Post published these stories, it started to encourage other media houses now to say, all right, well, if Washington is doing it, then we can do it.
Yeah.
And I can get a story out there. Now there we can see that we can really go in there and get to understand, what's going on politically.
So this story was one of the many stories that influenced investigative journalism in the field.
It did.
And let us pause for a moment and appreciate investigative journalism.
Indeed.
Because it's not just going out there and getting one interview and coming back and writing a story. You have to go undercover in some places that you might not want to.
But
It's some, and in some cases, if not most cases, it's life and death situation.
Right.
but what you
Because
think
you're
about
rooted
the
up. Oh, go ahead.
what you think about the storytelling in and of itself, though? The storytelling, the story itself. What do you think about it? How did they bring the story to life? Like when you read the story, yours, it was kind of on the emotional side of it. What do you think about it? Like the storytelling
think-
aspect of it.
I think for this story, because it was multiple stories, so one story in particular was the break-in. So they wrote an entire article about that. And then they wrote another article about finding the communication devices, right? And then they wrote another article about linking the campaign manager to the burglars and, the whole ordeal. I think in writing about the break-in, it was not so much. It was descriptive to an extent. So how they found the burglar was that there was a line. So they were trying to use a line to access entry to the office. And the guardsman saw this line, the string, this actual string, and he's like, why is there a string here? It's weird, So then he goes up and he finds them, and then he calls the police and they get them there. That's as much description as I got while reading the story. It wasn't that much descriptive, but it got to the point, and then they detailed the devices that were there. So they told you how many devices they had, they told you what their use of it was for, and that was basically it. There was no much description of the persons. I don't know how they look, can't tell you, but it was very straightforward.
So the emphasis was more on the corruption,
Right.
and bringing that out.
Of understanding,
and
really.
I could understand that when they don't include a lot of people in there, and this is describing people, because with investigative journalism, acquiring evidence and that sort of information, people might go on the record, people might not want to go on the record.
Right.
You know what I mean? And you made mention that there were multiple stories combined. My story was just one story, but think about how complex her story was there were multiple stories
Pieces, right? To join
attached
together
to
to actually form out this
Right.
whole story to say that this is a story of political corruption. So they had to go through several stories to get to the end point of the investigation.
and that can show you that they probably been working on this for years.
Yeah.
And this gives us a different view on what a feature is. We know that it's a free form
Yeah.
way of writing, yes?
Yes.
But the way how your story was constructed
right.
gave me a new look on how
Perspective, yeah.
features
Yeah.
can be written. It doesn't have to be a one story
yeah.
thing,
That's true.
you know?
Definitely.
Definitely.
Picking bits and pieces. Because that's what your story was
Right,
about.
right.
That took a lot of time though, you know.
I
Let's
think-
think about the time that
Yes,
we have to
definitely.
appreciate
And the
those
effort, yeah.
journalists though, you know.
Funny enough,
We
I
have
think
to-
they probably did the job of the police because it was
Mhm.
through writing these stories that they got the authorities involved to say that okay, this seems fishy and this needs to go on an investigation. So I think journalism not just plays a part in educating the public, but even in solving crime, solving mysteries.
Yes.
So you look at it from that perspective, and I think that's why I love features because it gives you that free room to just write and roam, and to describe it, to say, to write it anyhow you want it to be written. It gives you a freer form to write, so you're not restricted to not say anything.
Right.
The fact that it's more than one story, you can see that, alright, they probably wrote the first story and say, alright, but then after reading that story, they're like, okay, probably this, I can probably add this, and then it went down. This is a good award-winning piece though. What do
I
you
think so.
I think.
Definitely.
So the piece, the award it won was the Pulitzer Prize recognition, and with that they awarded 2 journalists, I'd like to say, from the Washington Post. One was Bob Woodward, and the second person was Carl Bernstein. So although there were other persons who participated in writing the culmination of the story, those 2 persons were crucial. So I'm guessing that these were the 2 persons who really went out there and got the information, who went into the streets and really dug deep into the story. And you have other persons who just assist by probably editing and writing that here and there, but those persons were crucial in getting it. And I think I can see why it was an award-winning piece, given that it was so investigative, and 2, it brought corruption to the forefront for persons to see. And I think bringing that level of awareness, when you're in media, when you're in journalism, when you can bring that level of awareness to a society on whole, not just a particular country, not just the United States. You understand? It's the entire world. When you can do that and bring corruption at the forefront, that deserves every single award.
Yeah.
Every single award. So I think I can see where the award stemmed from.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Well, if we were supposed to compare these 2 award-winning stories, what do you think they have in common?
Most definitely the investigative. Right.
Yeah.
Aspect, yes.
Yeah, I
definitely.
Yeah.
was thinking about that. They both went out, they got the story, they wrote it, we are reading it, and
It's
Most definitely.
it was narrative, informative.
Right. It's
everything.
the whole investigative journey of both of them, because how Shanice's story went out with the writer, going back to said mountain, getting information from the persons who would have been in control of that area, and then putting it into the story to implore other persons, so now that you're going, you have a better idea of, listen, this is not a time I want to go around there. I don't want to go during this storm. And in my story, where the lead up to the grand finale of finding out that, listen, your president is corrupted. The lead up to it, from finding the persons breaking into the office, from linking the person breaking into the office with the campaign manager, from that being associated with a top CIA member. I mean, the lead up of it, just the investigating novelty of it, really dug into the story so that you find out that, listen, yes, I can see that you broke into this place, but why? Why would a layman like you want to break into the White House? What do you have to gain from that? Why do you want to go there? So I think both stories, the writers dug deep, and of course they had different styles of writing. Clearly,
Clearly, 2 different styles.
Right, but at the end of the day, I think the goal was met because both stories brought public awareness, and both stories, I think, were incredible, were remarkable. Both of them.
That's why they're award winning.
They are.
Yeah, they are award winning. Well, that was fruitful discussions. We had fruitful discussions indeed. We went in depth in those award winning pieces, and you could see the different writing styles. You could realize that these journalists, they did not just take a day or two, they spent probably weeks researching, interviewing, and that's what makes a good feature. From the headline, from you see a top tier headline, a good headline, you know it's a good feature. Well, I would encourage each and everyone to read these stories. We had our time, we read these stories, and they were good. They were really, really good, and we realized that these persons, they deserve the award. So I want you to read it for yourself, and you are going to realize, or you're going to see why they deserve the award. So these stories are the Snowfall story and the Watergate story. Read them, enjoy them, and give us your feedback. Of course, let us know what you think, because we think that it deserved the award.
And indeed, they did.
They did, and they got their award. So let us know what you think. That was fruitful discussions. I am Sabrina Crooks.
I'm Rochelle Pinnock.
And I'm Shani Savis.
See you next time.